Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today we have our guest, Dave Spooner of Innago. Today's title is SaaS and Property Management, and our tagline is How Property Managers Are Using SaaS to Improve Efficiency, Communication, and Maintenance. Dave Spooner is a co-founder of Innago, a property management software designed to simplify life for small to mid-sized landlords. He's been involved in the real estate technology space since 2013, working to enhance the way landlords and tenants communicate. In addition to his expertise in content marketing, Dave utilizes his experience with entrepreneurship and management to help landlords achieve sustained success. Thanks for joining us on the show, Dave.
Yeah, David, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So I noticed on your website that your platform seems to be very oriented towards a very large audience, and you're trying to make it available for free. Is that right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. We try to work with as many landlords as possible.
So what is the the monetization strategy, or is there one in the immediate future?
Yeah, we offer phone support and we have like a sales call line and everything. So we get calls all the time where people are like, "Hey, can you explain your pricing to me?" And oftentimes we'll be like, "Yeah, sure. Have you checked out our pricing page?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, of course I checked out your pricing page. I don't understand it. How is it free?"
Right,
And
right,
we
right.
always tell them it truly is free. There is no cost to landlords. There's no contract. There's really no catch. But that's inevitably what people ask for. What's the catch? We've monetized it a little differently. So instead of
Okay.
monetizing the landlords and kind of trying to price gouge a small set of landlords, we try to spread the cost out primarily amongst tenants and at a very reasonable level. So we charge for three things in Inago. One is online payments. The other one is tenant
Okay.
screening reports. And the third one is renter's insurance if somebody purchases a
I see.
policy through us. By default, all three of those are paid by the tenant. So if a tenant goes to pay rent online, we charge them $2 for an ACH transaction, 2.75% for a credit or debit card transaction. When they apply to a property, if screening reports are required as part of that application, the applicant pays $30 to $35. And finally, when they purchase a renter's insurance policy, we make a small commission. They pay for the standard renter's insurance rate, and that's that. Landlords can choose to take on some of those fees if they want to, but primarily landlords pass it on to their tenants who are happy to pay those small fees for access to this kind of feature set. And they're, landlords are using it for free.
So to make the unique economics of this business model scalable, it means you have to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the tenant side, yes. The answer is yes to
Yes.
that question. Absolutely.
How are you scaling your marketing to make that a reality?
So our marketing is primarily inbound. Like any good startup SaaS company, when we first started out, it was all outbound, right? We were cold calling, we were smiling and dialing, we were getting a hold of as many landlords and property managers as we could because nobody knew who we were and they wouldn't know where to find us if they
Right.
started searching. But we really put a concerted effort from day one into building a content library and building an SEO strategy that would really bring people to us. So it's a combination of paid digital and organic digital that comes in. It's about a 50-50 split roughly. But people find us. It's not really us going out to find them. We've been fairly reserved in more traditional channels like attending conferences. Of course, this would have been a terrible year for that anyway. But attending conferences or sponsoring different events, we're more focused on our own internal content and bringing people to us at this stage.
Okay. And when you were first getting started with cold calling, how do you know how to find all these property managers?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the very early stages, it was just kind of Google searching landlords and property managers, putting together spreadsheets and then running through calls. We had virtual assistants working for us, just low cost ways of acquiring that kind of data. Then from there, you can get a little bit more savvy. If you join certain trade associations, sometimes there's a book of business that's associated with it. You can do some mining on things like LinkedIn. There's all sorts of software packages you can use, like Hunter, to grab email addresses from various websites. So we would do all the tricks. The problem is, I mean, the return on that kind of stuff is just so low, especially for our business model where,
Right.
like you said, we need hundreds of thousands of tenants, right? Which means we need tens of thousands of landlords to make it work. You can't do that when you've got a hit rate of 1 or 2% on your cold calls, right? I mean, that's just, it just doesn't make any sense. So it was really just a way to establish ourselves. So we used all the different techniques to try to build that Rolodex and bring on as many landlords as we could.
Where did the idea of this business come from? Have you worked in property management yourself? If not, how did you hear about these problems that these people were facing?
Yeah, so currently I do. I own rental units. I have 6. We're looking to acquire a handful more. We're actually
Hmm.
hunting for some properties right now. So now I finally have the same experience that so many of our clients have, which is great on the product side. It really helps guide some of our decision making and understanding their pain points. But primarily, no. When we first started off, I did not own any rental units. I'd certainly rented before, so I knew it from the tenant's perspective, but I did not own any rental units. I actually worked previously on a software platform that was geared towards student housing. It was a listing service for student housing, so helping students find a place to live. Ultimately, that venture did not work out. I think that there's a lot of pain on the student housing side for the students, but not a lot of pain for the landlords. They have 99%
Right.
occupancy. So they just don't care. They're like, a listing service. Why do we want a listing service? Everything's working great for us. So ultimately that didn't work, but we did get a chance to interact with so many landlords as part of that process. And most landlords in the student housing space are small to mid-sized independent landlords. And again and again and again, we kept hearing, we don't have tools that are easy enough for us to use. We don't have tools that are low cost, that are tailored to our processes, that are flexible enough to work within our processes. We just kept hearing that. And finally, myself and the CTO of Innago said, "Hey, let's build this. Well, everybody keeps asking for it. Let's go out and create it."
And how did you find your first customers? Like, did you
Well,
have connections?
I mean, not really. We knew some folks in the industry from our previous venture, so a lot of our focus early on was with student housing landlords. Called up some people that we knew that we had good experiences with in the past, and we were able to bring them on. I remember the first customer we ever signed. I actually met him in his office. This is a classic landlord thing, which was a Brugger's Bagels down the street. So it was a local landlord here in Cincinnati, and he's like, "Yeah, meet me in my office." I bought him a breakfast sandwich, and he signed on that day. So it was, like I said, it was cold calling. It was a lot of relationship building early on. I would go to landlords' houses sometimes because they were like, "Hey, that's where I am. If you want to show me how to use this thing, come on over. We'll take a look at it." And we would spend an hour together where I'd take them through the program. Here's how to do this, that, or another thing. Here's how it's going to raise efficiencies for you. It was incredibly high touch in the early stages because that's what you have to do, unless you have a lot of clout within an industry or some other ways to attract those customers. You really got to handhold those early customers, and that's what we did.
Gotcha. And when you say small to mid-sized landlord, can you define what a small landlord is and what a mid-sized one is?
Yeah, so small would be really anywhere from like 1 to 15 units, roughly.
Okay.
So these are typically at that stage is when people start to consider more robust systems, maybe hiring additional help, whether it's a property manager or a handyman that works full time for them or even part time, that kind of thing. Mid-size would be on up to about 100 units, which is typically where you really do need to have a full-time property manager once you hit that 100 unit count, if you haven't already made that leap. So we typically target people that are 1 to 100 units, but we actually work with landlords that are much larger. One of the central kind of tenets of what we tried to build with Innago was a platform that's flexible enough to work with lots of different landlords. Every landlord does things differently. Because so many of them are DIY, they all figured it out on their own, right? They figured out some unique way of handling this. They didn't go to university to go learn how to be a landlord for the most part. So they were all doing things differently. So it was really important for us to build Innago in such a way that allowed for that made it flexible. And kind of the one of the positive outcomes of that is that while we were designed and intended to be used by 1 to 100 unit landlords, it's flexible enough that we work with landlords that are as big as 2,000 units. That's our biggest. We don't target them necessarily from a sales and marketing standpoint, but if they're looking for great software to help manage their tenants, we can get the job done for them and do it for free.
I imagine your software is also like the structure of the business model also makes it so users are extremely sticky. Once people get used to the platform, the cost to switch emotionally is high on top of the fact that it's low cost already.
Right, exactly. You've got all these tenants paying rent online, ideally. You've got all these documents that may have been signed digitally. You'd have to export all those. And we make it easy to export the data, but you have to pull all that out, bring it into a new software. Yeah, it's painful to switch once you've onboarded. We typically see once somebody has had some certain adoption triggers, the lifetime value just kind of goes up and up and up of these customers because they're with us for I mean, we haven't been in existence for 10, 20 years, but we can't imagine some of these folks leaving while they own properties.
Right, right. How did you so you started this a couple of years ago, is that right?
Yeah, January of 2017 is when we were founded. So we're about 4.5 years old now, a little under.
How did you know how to go about building an MVP, or was that a learning experience for you?
Oh, big time learning experience. Now
Okay.
I'm non-technical. I do operate sort of as the product owner in a Scrum sense. So I communicate between the sales and marketing and the customer service teams and the product team just to figure out how to best build the product itself. But I'm non-technical, so I can take very little credit for figuring out how to do the MVP and how to do everything else. That
Yeah.
credit mostly goes to Yasser Drabu, who's our CTO and the co-founder of Innago.
Okay. And how'd you meet these other co-founders?
Yasser and I actually met working for that previous company that was building the listing service for student
I
housing.
see.
So he's based up in the Akron area, Cleveland area in Ohio. I was up there for the summer working on that platform, and we got to know each other. We really hit it off. We worked well together, and yeah, we were able to continue together in Innago.
If you're able to pinpoint it, what would you say are the traits in him that are that you consider ideal in a co-founder?
I think, I get asked this question sometimes, and I've talked to a lot of other co-founders about, I liken being in a startup, especially in the early stages, kind of like being in a band, right? Like if you form a band, you have some level of ambition where you're like, we could be Nirvana, right? Like you probably won't be, but you could be, right? And that ambition can kind of cloud the early stages and complicate it. There's a lot of tension and power dynamics over, who does what, who owns what, who has which responsibilities, how can you delegate things. And a lot of times it's so premature because you're not Nirvana, right? You haven't even played at the local bar yet. You're just a rinky-dink startup that's still trying to figure things out. I think that the most important aspect is having somebody you can trust, both emotionally, trust their ethics, and trust that they are capable of delivering on the work, that you don't have to micromanage, that you feel like, okay, they're going to get it done oftentimes in ways that I couldn't even accomplish myself. So I would say trust is really the biggest factor when working with a co-founder. And if you don't have that from the get-go, I would strongly, reconsider either how do you get to that point or maybe find a different co-founder or a different company to work on.
One of the challenging things about co-founders is that you generally don't just find them through messaging random job boards. Like you had to have
Right.
past history with these people. You had
Totally.
to really know these people inside and out. And I imagine people would love more co-founders if they just had the right people in their networks.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's not like Craigslist where you can hop on and find a random roommate, right? It's probably not going to work so well if you do that. Yeah, I think you're right. I think having some level of history with somebody, if you've worked with them directly, on a team before, or if you've worked with them indirectly, just through a larger network, is a really important step in the process. Yeah, you got to kind of know how they work in order to build that trust.
So as I guess the leader of the product development, once the MVP was built and you've developed all the core set of features, how do you know what to build next?
Yeah, that's a tough question. There's a lot of, we're in an industry with so many different landlords. And as I said, all of them do things differently. So there's plenty of opportunity for feature creep, right? Everybody wants something different. One of the features, just as an example, that we've kind of shied away from is building out full back-end accounting. So we're not trying to compete
I
with
see.
QuickBooks, right? We're not trying to
Right, right.
manage your payroll for some of these landlords that do, or property managers that do have people underneath them and employees. Our focus is on building, we call ourselves internally tenant management software. It's not an industry term, so we don't really use it externally very much. But what we mean by that is we're focused on that tenant landlord relationship above all else. You can easily build a pro forma for your financial assets, right? Like you can figure out how much is this going to be worth in 5 years and do it pretty darn accurately looking at market trends. The one thing that you can't control through spreadsheets is your tenant's behavior, right? They're the variable. So Innago is a tool set to try and really optimize that relationship between tenant and landlord. And that's been the biggest thing for us, is keeping that really, really focused, because we'll get requests all the time. So early on, a 500 unit landlord comes up and they say, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I love the free model, but I got to tell you, I have to have this very specific feature that maybe doesn't fit within the larger roadmap. And having to say no to those conversations is really tough when you're struggling to bring on customers, especially to bring on big customers. So that was really the central guiding light for us, is find your unique approach within the market, find your kind of niche in there, and make sure that your product is sticking to that, unless you make a decision to fully pivot. And if you do that, now you're going in a different direction, and follow that direction fully. But find a direction and kind of, make all of your decisions push you in that direction further.
Was the free pricing model always was that the day one plan, or was that something that came about after the fact?
No, that came about. We experimented quite a bit with pricing, and that was by design. We kind of knew from the get-go we didn't have a full handle. We weren't sure what the expectations were within the market, and we wanted to try some things out. So we would try, I would say we probably tried, 4 different pricing models over time, various levels of complexity to them. We would try them for 2-3 months at a time, and then we'd jump to a new one. Sometimes, some of the early landlords would be like, you're changing pricing again? Like, what's going on over there? But yeah, we tried a few different before we settled on the free model.
Okay. And I imagine you have all the numbers internally to figure out that the math makes sense for costs of acquisition and lifetime value, or are you still trying to figure that out?
No, we do have that. We're very fortunate, and these are numbers that change, but we're very fortunate that we're able to return all value on an acquisition within anywhere from 3 to 5 months. Of acquiring them, because of the long lifetime values. It's a pretty tremendous number from a business standpoint to be able to do that with somebody you're going to be with for years and years in the future.
And I imagine that over time, the LTV to CAC ratio gets better as you have more inbound leads.
Right, exactly. At least we hope so.
So, do you have any mechanisms right now for people to refer one another and get some sort of bonus?
We
talked. If a landlord knew another landlord.
Right. Yeah. It's challenging with a free model, right? Because it's not as easy to just say hey, we're going to waive the fees for a month or something. You get it for 3 months free or another month free every person you refer. We don't currently really do anything. We have discussed it. I think it's something that we intend to start doing here in the not too distant future. I think what we'll probably do. This is a way too early idea here, but I think what we'll probably do is, we're obviously sending money into people's accounts, right? Tenant pays $1,000, we're sending it into the landlord's account. Well, imagine you're getting a bonus $100 this month, right? For referring somebody. So it'll likely be something like that. At this stage, we're not really doing it much. We're getting a lot of new leads just naturally, but as we figure out different ways to maximize channels, I think it's a great opportunity.
So now that you've been in this for a few years, are you more focused on the product roadmap or the growth roadmap? Or do you feel like you dedicate equal focus to both?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're really a product driven company. So I would say that most of my blood, sweat, and certainly tears are dedicated to the product. Currently, we are starting to make that shift. We were really product focused until the end of 2019. During 2020, we started to expand our marketing budgets. We started to experiment with different marketing channels that we hadn't tapped into previously. And so the balance shifted a little bit. It's probably still 60 to 70% product focus and the rest on growth focus though.
How long of a product roadmap are you generally planning for? Just because the market needs change all the time, especially with COVID. Are you trying to plan out for the next 6 months, 2 years? How far are you looking when you think about product?
Yeah, we don't plan very far ahead by design. We really try to emulate agile as best we can. So we don't plan too far ahead. We have a large backlog that we do go through regularly. So we definitely have more than 2 years worth of features laid out and designs laid out for some of them. But we don't necessarily, we prioritize immediacy, right? So we prioritize for the next 3 to 6 months. Often those priorities even get shuffled, so it's hard to commit too hard. So yeah, we're really in like a 2 week to 4 week hard prioritization, and then after that, it's a little bit softer, and after that, it's pretty loosey goosey.
How big is your technical team right now? The ones that develop the product?
We've got about 25 ish on the total technical
Oh wow.
team. Yeah, it's a pretty
Are they
substantial
all
team.
based? Are they all physically near you, or are they spread out across the world?
Spread out. We've got, we actually, yeah, we don't have anybody in Cincinnati, which is where I am.
Okay.
There's a good sized team up in the Akron area with Yasser, our CTO. We've also got folks in Canada. We've got folks in Pakistan. We've got folks in India. We are spread out all over.
And how do you go about managing all of those international connections? I imagine the time zone differences lead to a lot of stress.
It's challenging. We're in a good rhythm now, but we've been doing this a while.
Okay.
There are some advantages. So Yasser, our co-founder, he is originally from India. He's from the Kashmir region, but he lives in the U.S. now. So he's an excellent bridge between the two. I do not yet know Hindi, maybe someday, but he's an excellent bridge, and he helps. There's cultural differences, and there's work differences. There's the way that different people from different countries approach problems and challenges and expectations is totally different. And those are it takes some time to learn those differences and to manage those differences. And he's been a great liaison between the two. But yeah, it's challenging. I mean, the time zone thing is tough. We have very, very busy mornings. That's when everybody's up and working full days. So up until noon or 1 p.m., things are pretty hectic on our end. Yeah, I think just having a team that's really focused on communicating with one another and can trust one another, again, it's so important. That makes things run smoothly, regardless of where they're located.
A team of 20 to 30-ish people, all in the product development team, as well as a roughly, you said 2 year, enough features for the next 2 years. Is that right?
Yeah, we certainly do.
That's a lot of features.
It's well, I mean, some we'll get to some, we won't get to others.
Okay. What goes through your mind when you choose to put a certain feature on the roadmap versus choosing to push it back into the backlog? Like, how do you prioritize?
Yeah, it's a great question. We prioritize primarily based on the return value we expect from the feature, right? So how many, and we internally examine this, but to give you just kind of a sneak peek, how many landlords do we expect this to impact? What will this do to certain ratios that we value, like conversion ratios, acquisition ratios, et cetera? What will this do to internal efficiencies? So there's plenty of things that we do that have nothing to do with the product that people interact with day to day, right? And just kind of weighing all those different items to get ourselves to really the next big benchmark in acquisition or in revenue generated or in whatever it may be. So we kind of weigh all those together, and that's how we come up with our general roadmap.
Okay. And in the process of building on that, are there certain like tools you use for like project management at that scale? Imagine you're not just using a text file or a notepad to keep track of 30 people.
No, we are not. We use Jira a lot, and Jira is huge, obviously. But then there's a ton of other programs that slot right into Jira that we use as well. We're on Office 365, so Teams is certainly a critical tool for us to communicate back and forth. We use a lot of OneNote files. We use Zeppelin. That's a great place to manage the design, the UI UX. So tons of different platforms that we're using. Lots of tools.
Do you have a like North Star that guides you in life beyond the scope of just this business? Like what motivates you to build Innago and I guess maybe subsequent businesses after Innago?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really like taking on new challenges and learning something different every day. And that has been really the number one thing that has driven me forward within Innago, because it's hard work. And, there's good days and there's bad days. Fortunately, at this point, we have a lot more good days than bad days. But in the early stages, that ratio is totally flipped. And the one thing that can keep you pressing onward is, hey, I don't have a normal 9 to 5 here. Sure, I work really long hours, but every day is new, every day is different. I can take on product things, I can take on marketing things, I can take on customer service things. Even within those internal teams, those folks have so many different directions they can take things with a fast growing company. I'd say that's the kind of guiding principle within the business and within my motivation for continuing to work on it is just trying new things, keeping things interesting, having some variety in the work that we're doing.
So let's say we fast forward to a potential future where every landlord on the planet uses Innago,
That's
and
the dream.
all of the features on your current 2-year roadmap are complete. What's next?
What's next, man? Boy, that's a tough question. Well, if everybody's using it, we jack up the price. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I suppose we would. I don't know. I don't know what happens after that. We would probably start to look into other industries that we can tap into, other ways that we can add efficiencies within what we're currently offering. You said the planet right now we're just U.S. based, so that is definitely an ambition is to go international. So I would say I don't know how soon that'll happen, but probably before a 2-year mark. But that'll be a major hurdle, a major leap to take. And that'll change a lot of things because each market does things differently. I mean, you think Cincinnati versus San Francisco is a big leap. Just imagine San Francisco to Beijing. It's a completely different animal.
You've raised funds so far, right? That's correct?
We have. Yep.
How was that something that was your responsibility or your co-founder's responsibility, or did you share it?
We shared it. Yep, and it's a full-time job.
That's exactly the next question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
How many hours do you think you spent to find the amount of current funding that you do have right now?
Oh my gosh, I don't.
If you're able to loosely quantify it.
It really is virtually a full-time job. I mean, I think when you're hardcore fundraising, you're working at least 20 to 30 hours a week on that fundraising process. Everybody that you're trying to fundraise is going to have different requirements, different asks that they have. You need to do a lot of networking. You need to do a lot of pitches while still running a business. It's tough. It's a lot to take on. I don't know how many total hours. I can say that we pretty much started fundraising within 6 months of founding Innago, and we closed our first round at the end of that year. So it probably took us about 6 months, and we were working on it just about full time every week. Yeah.
Okay. How many rejections did you have to face before you got that yes?
Quite a few, a lot of them. Some are soft rejections. Some are like early rejections where they're like, this isn't really my space. Like, sounds interesting, but I'm not that interested. Some you go pretty far down that road, and ultimately they say, nah, I'm not going to make this jump. I don't know, any double digits for sure number of rejections.
How did you personally manage the discouragement, or is this something you're just used to or expected ahead of time?
Yeah, I was actually just talking to somebody the other day about this. She's involved in the angel funding scene here in Cincinnati, and she asked me, "What do you think the most important quality is for somebody founding a company?" And I said, "I think it's naivete. I think it's just not understanding what you're getting yourself into." And she said, "I think naivete with a splash of grit, right? You got to be able to kind of force your way through and overcome it, despite the fact that you don't know what you're heading towards." And I think that really is true. I mean, if I had known how difficult it would be, now I'm very happy I've made the decisions I've made and we've come where we are now. But if I had known how hard it was going to be, there's no way I would have chosen to go this route. It's just so much more challenging. But having that naivete and again having that kind of thirst to take on new challenges and do different things is how you keep that moving forward and how you keep overcoming those challenges in difficult times.
So you mentioned networking as a tool for fundraising. How would you recommend someone who's founding a company for the first time to go about networking for the sake of successfully raising funds?
Yeah, I would.
And assume you're not in a major city.
Not in a major city. I would say that. So most cities these days that are not. I mean, I'm not talking about your 50,000 people cities, but anything that has a couple 100,000 people at least. There's probably some sort of angel network. People that have a little bit of money that are interested in doing some investing. Now, maybe they're not that active, but they probably are actively meeting. They might not be putting a lot of money out there, but those people are going to be well connected, right? So get in front of those as quickly as possible. don't look at every single meeting as an opportunity to raise funding. In fact, a better way to approach it is oftentimes to go to somebody and say, hey, I don't want to raise money from you. I know you're probably not interested in this, but could you just review my pitch and tell me where I can improve? What would typically interest you if I tweaked it? And you'll find that sometimes those people will end up being interested, but that's a soft entrance to that conversation, right? They don't think that you're hard selling them the whole time. They don't come in with, oh, now I'm going to have to let this person down, right? Now I'm going to have to say no to this person, which isn't fun on their end either. So I would recommend just finding soft ways to have those conversations. Don't be in hard sell mode all the time. Just meet people, say, hey, I'm looking for this. Do you know anybody? It's going to end up being a lead on a lead on a lead on a lead that is the one that funds you oftentimes, especially if you're coming from some of these smaller cities and smaller networks.
So how is that the path that you found, like something local, like you physically met someone who physically connected you to someone else, who connected you to someone else that lets the investor?
We ultimately, the investor that we brought on first had a previous relationship with my co-founder, Yasser. And we actually did exactly what I just described. We reached out to him. We had done a ton of pitches and we said, hey, can we give you a pitch and you tell us where our gaps are, where we can improve? And we kind of quietly, had the idea, well, maybe he's really going to like it. And he did. I mean, he had criticism. He had feedback. He said, how do you fix this? How do you take this on? But we came back to him and we said, hey, we've done all this stuff. What do you think now? And he said, all right, I love it. Let's do it. Let's invest. So, it took a lot of refinement before we got there. Our pitch was certainly not in its infancy. If he had seen our original pitch, he probably would have been like, no, I'm out of here. But it was far enough along that with a little bit of healthy criticism and a little bit of healthy feedback, we were able to get it to a point that he really liked. And again, it was a soft entrance to that conversation. It wasn't a hard sell. It wasn't a, hey, watch this so that you can give us some money.
That's pretty neat. Would you, are you the one who'd probably be responsible for raising the next round of funds once you hit that next milestone?
We'll tag team it to a certain degree, but I'll probably be the primary on it.
Okay. I was going to ask, how'd you choose to split it such that both of you focus on fundraising? Just because usually the distribution I usually see is one person focuses on fundraising, the other person focuses on tech, a third person focuses on operations, etc.
Yeah, we just kind of wear all the hats, and maybe it's not the most efficient way to do it, but part of it was about expanding the network, knowing that you need a big network to raise funds. We both had access to totally different networks, especially being in two different locations. He's in Akron, I'm down in Cincinnati. That totally changes things as well. So I think it just made sense to give us the most coverage possible early on. Moving forward, it'll primarily be my responsibility, but we are really truly a partnership. I mean, we're essentially co-presidents of Innago. So any decision making, any meetings, those types of things, we like to bring both of us on to manage those conversations and paths forward.
I see. And you're at the stage, you said you have 30 people in product, right? What about people in marketing and are there people in sales? How many people are there outside of the product team you previously mentioned?
So the product team includes the development, the management of the product. It includes the UI UX team, which also dabbles a bit in the marketing space as well, but they're primarily working on product. Again, we're product focused. Mm-hmm. So we really divided into customer support, sales, and marketing as the three other kind of departments. We have 7 people on that side of things. So it's a much smaller team managing that side because again, we're not growth focused, we're product focused primarily.
How'd you know how to hire these people? Like, what trait do you look for when you're hiring to know that they're a good fit for the long term?
Yeah, another kind of trick by design that we did early on was when it was just myself and Yasser, my co-founder, we very, very quickly started hiring interns. They were paid internships. We were giving them money, but that's a lot cheaper and a lot lower stakes than hiring somebody full time. And the point of that was to experiment, to see which traits did meld well with what we were doing, to see, on our end, what we were good at and not good at from a management standpoint, which is really, really important. Understanding how to delegate work properly, understanding how to onboard people properly. I think we did 3 cohorts of interns, each one 3 people. And by the third one, we had a pretty good rhythm going. And at that point, we were like, okay, we're ready to make some hires. And we actually hired some of our interns from that third cohort to be full-time members of the team. They were our first hires. So it took a little while to iron things out, but I think that was a really critical step for us, is just experimenting and trying things out with the low stakes environment. Because once you do have a full-time hire, it's so much harder to move on. You're going to invest a ton of time and effort into them before you can let them go or let them be a valuable member of the team. So I would say that traits that are important, I don't know if there's a smoking gun trait. I think that it's important to bring together a team that has a wide variety of traits and a wide variety of different perspectives. I very much recognize my own limitations, and I want people in the room that are smarter, especially smarter on specific topics than I can be. And finding those people is really important. Don't just find somebody that's well-rounded or a reflection of yourself. Try some different people with different perspectives, and they're going to bring a lot of value.
How do you find these where did you set up these like internship postings? Like,
Yeah,
did you go to like universities, or how did you approach it?
Exactly. Yeah, we went straight to local universities. Cincinnati, for example, has a pretty robust university scene with University of Cincinnati and Xavier University, just to name a couple. Miami University is just an hour away up north. There's a bunch in Kentucky. There's plenty of universities, and that's true for a lot of cities and a lot of metro areas. There's so much talent in those universities. They may be raw, they may be green, but there's a lot of talent there. And a lot of people that are ambitious and ready to try some interesting things. So we tapped them. We got in touch with professors. We got in touch with clubs. We got in touch with all sorts of different organizations. A lot of universities use a platform called Handshake now to manage internships. So we got postings on there. Anything we could to get in front of students. And we had a lot of applicants. We met with a ton of applicants and found some really great interns in just about every cohort we did.
Do you go do you target people in their sophomore, junior years, or are you also looking for like really, really young talent who are hungry?
We're generally pretty agnostic when it comes to an internship. I mean, it's nice to have somebody that's a little closer to graduating, because if you love them, it's nice to be able to bring them on full time after a short period of time. But we're agnostic. I mean, if we think they're a great fit, if the talent is there, if they seem like the best possible hire, then we're gonna make that jump.
Have you ever hired a student like full time after an internship, even though they have like, I don't know, 2 or 3 more years of schooling to go?
We have not brought somebody on like truly full time, like leave school and come to a salaried position. We have brought people on and said, hey, you've got a full time position at the end of this. How many hours can you give us? And they'll say 20 hours a week or whatever it may be. And we'll work with them for a full year. And then ultimately they roll into a full time position. But we haven't plucked somebody out of school just yet.
Okay, gotcha. I used to work at Uber, and that used to happen all the time. I
believe
one
it.
person who was a freshman who dropped out to join Uber. So
Oh my
kind of
gosh.
interesting to hear different narratives.
Yeah, good for them.
Do you have anything that you wish? Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. Had nothing really to contribute.
Do you have anything that you wish you knew from the very beginning that you know now, either in terms of like knowledge or decision or judgment?
There's so many things is really the answer. And that's why I think experimentation was so important early on, and continues to be really important. Honestly, leaning further into that and experimenting further and being even more methodical in our approach, recording how we're doing things when they're going well, also when they're not going well, whether it's hiring a batch of interns or a product release or whatever it may be. I think just leaning further into the experimentation, because there's so many things you don't know, no matter how seasoned you are as a creator or as a business person, as you're getting started.
Cool. Well, I've been learning a lot from you, and I just want to be thankful for your time, at the same time respectful for it. So I like to just end all of my calls with the same question. What's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you if that's something they would like to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us online at innago.com. That's INNAGO, and is in Nancy. We're on all the social media platforms. Just search Innago on Twitter or wherever, and we'll pop right up. We're also a company that is really transparent. I like to give my email away to folks, and you can seriously feel free to email me. I will respond. It's very simple. It's just Dave, Dave, at innago.com. So any questions that anybody has, whether you're a landlord or somebody interested in the industry, don't hesitate to reach out. We are happy to have a chat with you.